Well, good morning, and here it is again, another time for another installment of what it is that John F. Xuereb is going to say. I just wanted to tell you a story. I thought it was pertinent or maybe good to share this story with you. If you've heard of it from me before, then, listen again, because you can always learn something the second time around. As kids, we were always taught um, I don't know, a fairy tale. You always heard stories as kids, you know, Cinderella, Snow White, all these fables and stories. And it's kind of funny because I don't think that anybody really um, thinks about those stories when they're hearing them. I mean, when I was a kid, there was one that went sort of like rub dub dub, three men in a tub. And this is kind of something that we were listening to as kids, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure what this all means. But when you're an adult and you look back and you think about telling your children about three men in a tub, rubbing, soap and stuff. I don't know. It sounds a little bit strange, don't you think? Anyway, it's a little bit of humor. Anyway, there was a story that I think is really relevant, and it's the story of the Pied Piper. And the reason why I share this story is because I think it's part of our culture's way of sort of programming minds of children and getting the information into the mind of the child from a very early age so that it's easier to control or to manipulate as they get older. I don't really think that we live in a free world anymore, not with, cameras everywhere and spy stuff going on, and everybody's phone is accessible to everybody, and all these things are actually happening that kind of take us away from the way it used to be back 100 years ago when there was no technology, and the closest neighbor you had was a horse ride, and a horse and buggy ride that at least was like half hour or more. But anyway, back to the story. The Pied Piper. And if you know the story, the Pied Piper really kind of goes like this. There was a village, and in this village, these people were, dealing with this significant problem. And the problem was that they were overrun with rats. I think it's really mice, but anyway, we say rats. Rats are bigger and scarier. So the town is overrun with rats. They don't know what to do. They feel lost and frightened, I guess, by the circumstances because they're completely overpowered. So somehow they heard of a way to get this resolved, and they heard about this guy who later was known as the Pied Piper, who essentially would come in and play this magic flute, and everything would just seem to be all better. After all, fairy tales usually have a lot of magic in them. Life, not so much. So anyway, they call this guy up. It doesn't really matter the story, but they call him up. They bring him in, and he sees that they have this problem. He basically plays his flute, and a million rats follow him out of the city to the cliff, of which they all fall over to their death. It's kind of really as a child, you're hearing this story, you don't think nothing of it. I mean, you get this picture of some guy in a green hat and a green suit playing a magic flute, and it all sounds like a funny little story. But when you look back as an adult and you start to evaluate that story, which something I love doing is evaluating, what would you really see that story all about? And this is how I perceive that story, because I see it happening and playing itself out in our world culture constantly. So I see it like this. I see a huge amount of people who are in a position of being sort of at a loss for education, awareness. They're ignorant. They're not sure how to resolve a problem that they have because they were never really educated on how to resolve that problem. The problem in this case was that they were overrun with rats. So because they accumulatively, or all of them put together, couldn't figure out this problem, they ended up calling a man, meaning that they called one person that seemed already to have a huge amount of power over a whole village, which in itself is damning because it's saying that the whole village doesn't have that kind of power to resolve a problem, but one person does. So it's really stating that it's where the education lies. If one person has the education, they have the power, and that one person can overpower a complete village because a complete village is ignorant to education. So they bring this one person in, regardless of what they pay him. They could pay him a huge amount of money, because at that point, value for money is irrelevant to the circumstances. So, I mean, they can all put their money together. They could pay him €1,000,000 for, and that would be a great payday for him. And really, he would deserve that pay because no one has the education. He has the power, which inevitably, that's how you make money, is when no one knows what's going on. So he ends up playing this magic flute, which there is no such thing as a magic flute, but the magic flute is knowledge. It's the education. It's the key. It is the power. It's the magic. And he plays it, and all these rats go out and follow him all the way to the cliff and go over, and they all go to their death. The first question now that you want to understand is, or ask, is this: how many of the rats saw the cliff coming? Because in truth, if all these rats knew that they were going to their death over a cliff, you think they would all follow? Probably not. I don't think that anyone is into suicide in that respect. But 1,000,000 right over the cliff, all to their death. So how many of them saw the cliff coming? Well, in fact, only one. And it was the first one. And the first one was kind of duped, as we would say. They were hypnotized or mesmerized by the fact that this one powerful person was playing this music, and to them, they had no idea what it was all about, so they were intrigued, and it seemed good. It was silky, it was smooth, it was inviting, so that one went. The other 999,999 that also went to their death were going to their death not because they knew or understood anything. They went to their death because they were following. They followed the one. They followed the one rat, so they were looking at the one always in front of them. So as they all went over the edge, they didn't know what was coming. They were just following, ignorantly following along. The moral of the story, truthfully, is this, is that our culture for the last 100 years has been following, just following. And we are following over the cliff. We are not the same as we used to be 100 years ago. We don't walk down the street and say, "Hi, how are you?" and somebody answers back with an intent of really hearing you. It kind of becomes this, "Hey, how's it going? Good, good for you, thank you." Yeah, and you really don't care. Everyone is very insular and protected now and private, and we're not as happy as we used to be. We have so much technology. We're much more involved in distrust and fear. We're not coming together as family units. We're breaking apart. We're splitting apart at the seams. Everyone is face down on their computers or laptops or Facebook or doing whatever the case is. Kids are not raised anymore to go out and be active anymore. They're raised by getting on a phone like this and knowing how to use it faster than the adult. It's not part of it wasn't part of my generation growing up. It became a part, but for children, they're born right into it. So our whole culture is essentially now following what everyone else is doing. This is why an 8-year-old child or a 6-year-old, 5-year-old child can grab an iPad and do it right away. It just shows you that the mentality in the brain is changing. It's called evolution, and the evolution that we're going through is a disastrous one. Marriages don't stay together. I think the statistic about almost 15 years ago was 1 out of 2 would end up in divorce. It's a 50%. It's a 50% statistic. I would say it's much more than that now. I would say that now more people don't even want to get married for fear of losing what they have, losing their homes, losing their money, whatever the case is. They want to be here today, gone tomorrow, so on and so forth. We look at this and it's all part and parcel of our culture. We see this as technology. We see this as an advancement. We see this as the way it's going to be. If you look into the future, we're probably flying around in flying saucers and, cars with joysticks, which are flying and doing all these different things. And who knows? I mean, that's probably where we're going. I mean, the world is evolving so quickly, it's unbelievable. The advancements since the last 50 years is just huge. It's staggering. Some things may be good, some things maybe not so good. When it comes to the human being and being human, I think we're losing a lot of that. And I think the reason why we're losing it is because from the very beginning, planted seed, we were taught things like forever after, happily ever after. We were taught things that there are magic in our life. We could go to one person, and that one person had all the power and the education, and that person would lead everyone into safety. In reality, we're not any safer now than they were before. And we're not in a better place than we were before, and that's because we gave over all of our power. We gave our power to other people. We gave our power to people that had education and we didn't have any, instead of us seeking the education. And that is exactly what this is all about. So my story, my point, it's a long one today, is to get educated, to think of self, to go within yourself, to disconnect from a lot of things right now that are getting you off of the track that you wanted to be on. Don't go over the cliff. Don't follow everybody else. You don't need a Versace bag just because everyone else does. You don't need to have 2 cars in your household because everyone else does. You don't need to have the race of having the most and look the best and do all these things because everyone else is doing it. You don't have to do these things. We teach this to our children. You don't have to do what they do just because they do it. If they jumped off a bridge, would you as well? Of course not. So we're individuals, and we just need to not get caught up in the emotions and the culture and the excitement of our times, because this excitement is like the magic flute playing, and we are all so mesmerized that we do not see where it's going. And where it's going, stop for a second, take a step out, look at where you were when you were a child, look at where you are today, and ask yourself, is your life on the whole, in every aspect, relationship, personal, self-discovery, self-understanding, physical, health-wise, everything, is it better or is it different? And that's a significant question. Anyway, there are no fairy tales, and don't listen to the Pied Piper. You're the Pied Piper. The magic's in you, and you need to find that magic by getting educated and getting yourself on the right track. Okay, so that's my rant for the day, and hopefully that has inspired some people. Thanks. Have a great day. Ciao.